Blog Talk Radio.
You are now listening to True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history, and the authors that have written about them. Gacy, Bundy, Dahmer, The Night Stalker, BTK. Every week, another fascinating author talking about the most shocking and infamous killers in true crime history. True Murder, with your host, journalist and author, Dan Zupansky.
Good evening. This is your host, Dan Zupansky, for the program True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history, and the authors that have written about them. To his parishioners, Minister Matt Baker seemed a pious and a good man. To his wife, Kari, he was a devoted husband and caring father. Always sunny and vivacious, Kari never questioned their frequent relocations from one small Texas Baptist church to another. Even when tragedy struck, Kari remained strong until one day, inexplicably, she took her own life. To friends and family, however, Kari's suicide made no sense, and they struggled with questions they couldn't answer. Why couldn't Matt hold a job with any one church? Why did he cut off all contact with Kari's devastated parents soon after her death? And who was the blonde companion he had began appearing with just days after the funeral? But it would take a team of investigators and dogged determination to bring Matt Baker's dark secrets to light, revealing a shocking history of lies, infidelity, cruelty, and sexual obsession that may have led a serial predator cloaked in God's Word to commit murder. The book that we're going to be featuring this evening is Deadly Little Secrets, with my special guest journalist and author, Catherine Casey. Welcome back to the program, and thank you very much for this interview, Catherine Casey.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Dan. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Well, thank you very much. It's going to be a great little interview here because it's a great book and a very fascinating story. So first off, as I often ask, what brought you to this story? What compelled you or motivated you, really, because it takes a lot of motivation to write a book and a lot of work. What fascinated you about this case or interested you about this case that you decided to write about this particular case?
Well, I live in Houston, and this happened in Waco, Texas, and I started following the newspaper articles. It was just such a compelling case, the idea that this minister may have killed his wife, and all of the flubs that law enforcement committed in the investigation. It was just a fascinating case to follow.
Right. So you're very familiar with this little part of Texas, being somewhat in the vicinity. Tell us where this occurs, where Waco, Texas, for those people that might not know, and you give a history of, so maybe even give us a brief history of the really the most I guess important event that happened in Waco, Texas, that left an indelible mark on America and probably the world. Tell us about a little bit about Waco, Texas.
Well, Waco is in the hill country. It's north of Houston, north of Austin, in rolling hills. It's beautiful countryside, and it's where David Koresh holed up with his followers, Branch Davidians, and where the FBI and ATF were held at bay for so many days. Of course, that ended in a horrible fireball that killed dozens and dozens of people. It's
right.
It's also the epicenter of the Baptist Church. It's where Baylor University is, and Baylor is the university, the Baptist University.
And we're talking about a community of about 126,000, and like you say, it's fairly close to Austin and fairly close to San Antonio, and so it's in this area, in this sort of pretty well famous Texas area here. And so tell us a little bit more about some of the roots of the religious roots. How we talk about communities being deeply religious or having a religious history. Tell us a little bit more about how deep the roots go religious-wise in Waco.
This is a deeply religious city in the middle of the Texas Bible Belt. There are churches, mainly Baptist churches, on just about every other corner, some huge, some small. And people, God bless, when they see each other on the street, they're seen saying grace over their meals in restaurants. People take religion, their patriotism, very seriously here. It's very middle America and very religious.
And for those that don't know, and I was raised Roman Catholic, so I'm not so familiar, but would you say, just to clarify, Baptist Church would be right wing or right or left of say, what would you consider conservative religious people? Which way would it be? A little bit more right of that or left of that?
It would be conservative religious. It's very conservative middle America. It's an interesting community. It's had this history with David Koresh, and that's really what it's known for. And people tend to stay in Waco. Families are very tight, and everything circles around the family and the church.
Right. Now, tell us a little bit about, first off, I guess, if we could introduce some of the characters, main characters in this fascinating story. Let's talk about Matt Baker and his parents and where they were in the country, and what was his background? What was how was early life in Matt Baker's life and his parents? What was Matt Baker's background?
Well, from the outside, it appeared that he grew up in a very devout family in Kerrville, Texas, which is just south of Austin, south of San Antonio a little bit. Another beautiful small community in Texas. The family was very, very active in the Baptist church, the primary Baptist church in Kerrville. They did missions together. His parents were foster parents and had approximately 50 foster children while Matt was growing up. Matt was always very active in missions and very active at the church.
Now, was there anything extraordinary, unusual? What were his friends and people around him? What were their comments or general views about him around that time in his high school age? What was he characterized as?
Matt was considered to be kind of a nice guy. He was kind of a small kid, had kind of bushy brown hair, and really beautiful blue eyes. And really they thought that he was just this nice religious kid. He never got in any trouble that anybody knew of, and dads were glad that their daughters dated him.
Right. Now, when did religion become a bigger part or some form of focus for Matt? At what age did people notice that he was gravitating towards taking his religion a little more serious than the average person living in the community?
Well, in the Baptist church, people are baptized when they accept Jesus Christ. It's not like in the Catholic Church where they're baptized as infants. And Matt was baptized at quite a young age, which was 6. And he seemed devout from the very beginning. He talked a lot about church. He talked a lot about God. He expressed the ambition to work within a church, maybe in a recreation program, when he went off to Baylor, when he left Kerrville for Waco. And once he got to Waco, he continued in. They have a program there to instruct future ministers and future church workers, and he continued on in that program.
So he entered in, this was around 1990, we'll say he began his career in his education?
Mm-hmm. At Baylor University in Waco. And he was working part-time at that point at the Baptist Church in Waco, the largest Baptist church. He was helping to oversee the youth program.
Now, in that first 1990, because you did extensive interviews and you have information about people that were spoken to all along the way, it seems, in his life, as far as you could discover, what was 1990 characterized by? What were people's thoughts about him in school, and what was he considered? How was he considered in that first year in 1990, and were there any type of events whatsoever?
Well, there were kind of, at that point, the split in Matt's personality started to shine through. On one hand, when he was working as a trainer with the Baylor football team, he was one of those who bent farthest down on his knees during prayer session with his eyes closed and his hands folded and seemed the most enraptured. But then at other times, the people talked about the fact that he grabbed a girl and kissed her at a party. And then something happened while he was at Baylor. He attempted to sexually assault a young woman in one of the bathroom showers. She fought him off. She only got away from him by biting him in the shoulder. And she filed a complaint with Baylor University, but nothing was done.
Was that Lori Wilson?
That was Laura Wilson.
Laura Wilson, pardon me. So she filed a complaint, and tell us a little bit more about how he could have evaded any kind of trouble with that. How did that work?
Well, she was assured. I mean, he literally, Dan, chased her in the bathroom and assaulted her and pushed her up against a sink, and may have continued on if she hadn't fought him off. And she did go to authorities within the athletic program, and she was told it would be taken care of. But it wasn't. And they convinced her not to go to the police herself because they said that they would handle it. But Baylor did nothing. Matt continued on at school. He said later that he had a brief talk with someone in the hierarchy at the university before he was allowed back in the next semester, and that they sided with him. The proof of the pudding was that he was allowed to continue on at Baylor.
Right, especially in the capacity and that he was, and also it seems in retrospect, always hindsight is much easier to do, but that this would have been a pivotal time to intercede on everyone's behalf right around then.
Well, it might have changed history. It might have actually saved at least one life down the road. People would have known who Matt Baker was. He would have had a record. Instead, he continued on as one of the chosen ones, one of the young ministerial students.
Now, let's get to Kari Doolin, and then we'll lead right up to how they came to meet each other and how that first impression and how the relationship evolved. Tell us about Kari Doolin and her early life. Where was she from originally? And tell us a little bit about her background.
Well, Kari's mom was kind of an army brat and had moved around the world with her family growing up. And the family had settled in central Texas. And it was there. Actually, Kari was born in Salt Lake City when Linda was married. And her biological father, died in a motorcycle accident. Linda moved back with Kari to Waco, and there met Jim Doolin, and they started a family. They had a very close family, along with all of Linda's sisters who lived in the area. So it was just kind of this big family with aunts and uncles and lots of cousins. And Kari was just this kind of happy kid growing up. She loved to sing. The Doolins had religion in their background. They were a religious family as well. They had a couple of ministers in the family, and one of the uncles was a music minister at a Baptist church down in Florida. So they went, they centered their life too around their faith. And Kari went away to Texas Tech at one point when she graduated from high school. And it was at Tech that things got just a little bit wild. Not terribly wild, but a little bit. She belonged to a sorority, and she decided she wanted to come back and reclaim her roots. so after the year at Texas Tech, she moved back to Waco and was looking at continuing school there and eventually getting into Baylor. And she began working in the same program Matt did at First Baptist Church in Waco, and it was there that their paths crossed for the first time.
Now, according to friends and people at the time that you interviewed, what was Kari's impression of Matt Baker?
Matt was a catch. A lot of the girls in the program, a lot of the girls at Baylor thought that he was this really sweet, really devout, just great guy. And he talked a lot about wanting to go out and help people, carrying the word of God out to the people. And Kari had expressed to her mother the desire to get back to her roots, to get back to her religion, and to find a good Christian man to marry. And Matt appeared, from what Kari knew at that point, from what Matt showed the world, he appeared to fit the bill. So he was considered quite a catch at Baylor.
And he was also wanting to combine athletics in his career as well, because he had a deep interest in that as well. So, again, just saying young people too also have an interest in the physical. So there was this physical attraction as well.
Oh, there was. I mean, when they met, they were very attracted to one another. It seemed like from the beginning they became a couple. They started showing up at church together in the morning and leaving in the evening together, and were rarely seen alone. They were only dating for a couple of months when they announced that they wanted to get married.
Now, in the ensuing 2 months and before the announcement, and I could just imagine, in 2 months you make an announcement like that. I don't care who you are, as open-minded as anyone, there'd be some concern. But what was the general impression of from Kari's family about Matt? What I know it's after the fact, but again, what did they say that their impression was of Matt and the relationship itself?
They didn't see the attraction. They looked at Matt, and he seemed like kind of this odd little guy, this kind of strange guy. And, he did some odd things, like at family gatherings, instead of going off and watching football with the men in the living room while the women talked and laughed in the kitchen, Matt would stand at the doorway to the kitchen and listen to the women talk. And some of Kari's aunts thought that was strange, like he was listening in and monitoring her conversation. He was just kind of odd. And Kari, when she met Matt, dropped all of her friends. It was as if he monopolized all of her time.
Right. Now, what was the impression from Matt's parents about what were their thoughts about the relationship?
Matt's mom told me that she too was concerned that they were moving too fast. Both sets of parents wanted them to hold off. Matt's mom said that they liked Kari, but they just thought it was too soon. But Matt and Kari were really determined, and that August, before school started, before Baylor started again, and Kari began first at the community college and then went on to Baylor later, they married at the Doolan's home.
So how did they get the parents to go along with this? This must have been some bit of convincing on both of their parts, because like you say, deeply religious, and what's the hurry, and everybody wants to make sure that this is something that they're very, very serious about, especially in a religious community, that they take this institution, this step into marriage very, very seriously. Was he that charming? Were they that convinced? How could they persuade both families to sort of put aside their fears and go along with this?
Well, Linda Doolan, Kari's mom, told her that they were going to be on their own. They were going to have to pay their own rent. They wouldn't be paying her bills any longer. They were not going to keep up the payments on her car. I mean, they really tried to slow it down. It wasn't that they didn't want Kari to marry Matt. They didn't want Kari to marry anyone that quickly. But Kari was just determined, and when Kari was determined, she was a force to be dealt with. She had a lot of spunk, and she was in love with Matt, and she wasn't taking no for an answer. And Matt was just as determined. He called up his mother and said, "Listen, two can live as cheaply as one, maybe cheaper than two people living separately." And the families went along with it.
Now, what was the marriage itself? What was it like? Were there any events? Tell us about the actual marriage ceremony.
Well, the marriage ceremony was very, very small, and it was at the Doolan's home. Kari's uncle, I believe it was, married them. He's a Baptist minister,
right.
And she had a beautiful white gown, and he was all dressed up. His shirt looked a little bit, in the pictures I've seen, his shirt was a little big around the collar, and they looked like two kids getting married, because they were kind of two kids getting married, and there was a lot of hope for the future. They were excited. Their families at that point had given into the marriage, and they were excited for them, and they were hoping that there was a bright future ahead. But before long, things started to crop up, and it was obvious that there were other issues.
How long before we'll say Kari saw some changes and some concerns, and was she forthcoming with her family and the almost sister, cousin? Was she sharing some of this information about her concerns? Tell us how long it took before she had some concerns, and then how long before she expressed this to anyone?
Kari really didn't express concerns about Matt. She bought into Matt. She believed in Matt. Matt's very persuasive. He could be very manipulative. He could explain things away. There were allegations right about the time of the marriage floating around about Matt having attempted to kiss or been inappropriate with some of the teenage girls at First Baptist in the rec program when he was there, and that he had made an improper suggestion to someone, an older woman who worked at First Baptist. And rather than listen to what was being said and consider it, Kari immediately dismissed it. It was not her Matt. Her Matt wouldn't do that. That couldn't be true. Kari believed in Matt. She loved him. And she chose to look the other way.
Now, what were some of the issues that you alluded to that cropped up or came up soon after they tied the knot? What were some of these issues that seemed to be of concern?
Well, the first one was the one I just mentioned, the
right.
allegations at First Baptist that he'd been made inappropriate advances towards some of the women there. And then time went on and other things happened. They were living in a townhouse that shared a parking lot with the townhouse behind them. And the teenage girl who lived in the opposite townhouse told her mother that Matt had grabbed her in the parking lot and kissed her and had made an advance toward her. And that got back to Kari's aunt, and Kari's aunt called. Kari found out about it, but rather than demand Matt explain. Now, this is the second allegation in a short period of time against Matt.
Right.
Instead of demanding that Matt explain, Kari went over and, shouted at and pleaded with the girl, saying, "How could you say that about Matt? That's not true. Don't say that about my husband. That can't be true." She just really believed in Matt, and she loved him, and by that time she was pregnant. They'd been married for a little while, and she was pregnant with her first daughter. So she had a family. She was planning a future with this man, and she was determined that he was going to be the guy she believed he was.
Right. Now, how was he as a father?
He was a pretty good father. He pitched in and helped take care of the kids. Before long, Kari was pregnant again. At that point, Matt was working at the Y in Waco in a youth program there, where there were more allegations made against him. And Kari again ignored them, or sided with Matt. She didn't ignore them, but she sided with Matt against the women making the allegations. And but because really the Matt that Kari saw was this religious husband who gave her a Bible in which he inscribed it and said that he hoped that this would be her, she would write in this Bible as she went through life and put her thoughts in there, her deepest thoughts. He was the good father who helped take care of their daughters, the one who helped bathe the kids at night and read them stories. She saw this good man. She didn't see the other man.
Now, when she did, and I don't say she confronted him, but when she did ask about these allegations, that were so many of them, was he, classically, I guess people might, the radar might come up if he was really defensive, or if he got very, very angry, or if he was, didn't want to answer the questions at all. And so what was his demeanor when she did dare to ask him any questions?
Matt always had an explanation, and they were, on the surface, if you didn't really take a look at what was happening and add it all up, they were plausible explanations. The girls at the Y, he said that he was trying to counsel them. He's a minister. He said he was studying to be a minister at that point, that he was trying to counsel them about, entering, being a teenager and about sexuality. And they took it wrong. They misinterpreted. It was always the woman's fault. It was never that he had actually done anything. And Kari wanted to believe him. Wanting to believe somebody is a very powerful influence in a relationship. Kari had a stake in wanting Matt to be telling the truth, and she believed him.
Now, they're married. You said they were married at a young age. Approximately what age were they married at, and what's the difference in their age?
There's just a few years apart, and I think Kari was about 19.
Right. So now we're further along in the story here. The maybe we can get it when they have the two children, mm-hmm. And what situation are they at that time once the arrival of the second child, and what's going on in his life now? Because there's so many allegations. Are police ever involved with this? Have they been called?
No,
Is there
police have never been called. He was let go at the Y, and he was denied unemployment benefits because he was fired for sexual harassment. He was fired for cause. So, but the police were never notified of anything until Laura Wilson, the first woman, the woman from Baylor that he accosted in
right.
in the restroom, filed a complaint with the Waco Police Department. But at that point, it was past the statute of limitations, so the police couldn't do anything. So, but Kari and Matt were both going to school. Matt was continuing on. Now, people at Baylor knew about the allegation that Laura Wilson had made, but they allowed Matt to go ahead, not only finishing up his undergrad, but to become get into the master's program there, Master of Ministry. So he continued on. He got into a very prestigious program at the school.
And that prestigious program brought him what?
Well, it would have brought it. Eventually, he had a master's degree, which from Baylor University. So it was a big deal for him. He was being groomed to work in a large Baptist church. He was charismatic on the pulpit. People liked listening to him. He came across as one of the shining lights, one of the future stars.
Right. And at what point did he meet this? If I'm jumping ahead, I might be. When did he meet Vanessa Bowles?
Well, the baker's second daughter died after having been ill with cancer, and
right.
And then they had a third daughter named Grace, and they were living in Hewitt, Texas, outside of Waco. And Matt was ministering in a small church called Crossroads. And Vanessa Bowles was the music minister's daughter. She was quite a bit younger than Matt and Kari. Beautiful young girl. She had a she was divorced and had a child, a baby, a little girl named Lily, who was just a few months old at the time. And as he had with others in the past, Matt began making overtures toward her, sexual overtures. And before long, she was visiting him at their home on Fridays when Kari was at work and Matt had the day off.
Now let's go back, because I apologize because we jumped ahead and I'll confuse the audience a little bit, so I'll repair that somewhat. We just glossed over it a little bit, but her daughter that dies, Cassidy, right?
Cassidy, yeah.
Yes, Cassidy. Now, Cassidy dies. How this sunny disposition, this happy-go-lucky woman that even though she's saddled with this infidelity from her husband, still believes in her husband and doubts the word of these allegers. This person that was, like you say, described as a sunny disposition, a very happy person. This is important to the trial and later to the story. How affected was she? How devastated was she, and what was it? What was the overall effect in terms of devastation in terms for Kari when her daughter when the daughter died?
She was angry and she was hurt and she was upset and she was devastated. She was depressed for a little while. She had a very difficult time. Cassidy wasn't supposed to die. She had had some surgery. She'd been in the hospital for quite a while, but she came home with a pretty good prognosis, and then died in the middle of the night one night. And Kari was very upset. She was very despondent over her daughter's death.
Was there any talk of was there any suicidal thoughts, or was there, in this depression, was she prescribed any antidepressants, and was it long term? Tell us about that. Was there any talk of suicide? Was there any was she under a doctor's order or prescription for antidepressants at that time? Tell us about that kind of care.
No, she had no antidepressants. She had briefly had a prescription for a sleeping pill, but didn't renew it.
Right.
She went to a therapist, a grief counselor, and talked through it, and the counselor in her notes said that Kari was never suicidal. And
she must have recovered to a certain point, at least. She had another daughter, Grace. They had another daughter, Grace. And there was no evidence that she had any postpartum problems or any problems around that time or after the child was born?
She got blue around the anniversary of Cassidy's death every year and would have 2 or 3 bad days where she might stay home and not go to school. She was a teacher at that point.
Right.
So she sometimes sat around and watched movies of Cassidy and thought about her. They would release balloons every year on the date of Cassidy's death. But no, for the most part, she was happy, especially once Grace was born. Grace really was kind of she really helped Kari heal.
Right. Now, what was Matt Baker's reaction after his daughter died, and how did he respond in terms of his behavior, or what was his condition like after his daughter died?
Matt was stone-faced through the entire episode. Nobody saw him cry. Even the night of Cassidy's death in the emergency room at the hospital, when the nurses and doctors were crying, Matt wasn't. He was back up on the pulpit within a week. Kari was very confused by all this, couldn't understand how she could be so upset when Matt showed no emotion.
And was that a continuing issue with her from that time on? That have that profound an effect on her that stayed with her? That conclusion?
I think she always wondered why Matt hadn't shown more grief when Cassidy died. But once Grace came along and their lives went on, Matt was ministering at the church and he was working and she was teaching. She taught in an elementary school in Waco, and they had these 2 daughters to raise. And as life goes on, people put these things aside and just try to deal with what's going on in their lives at the time. So it didn't become an overwhelming division between them, no.
Okay, so we're back up to him meeting Vanessa. So tell us again how they met and how their relationship evolved, and again, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, Vanessa was this beautiful young woman who was the music minister's daughter at Matt's church. And Kari was very active at the church. She was there all the time with the youth groups, working with the women's clubs, and she met Vanessa at the same time, too. And the Christmas after Vanessa began coming to the church, which would have been 2005, Matt went up to her at one point and said something she was talking on the phone. She was divorced, and she was telling a friend that she was going to start dating again, or some guy wanted to date her. And Matt, when she hung up the phone, Matt said to her, you should do that. And she said, what? And he said, date your minister. And she said something on the order of, does your wife know? And he said, no, Kari doesn't have a clue.
And who did she tell this to ultimately?
Well, far down the road, she told this to authorities and then testified to it in a courtroom.
Okay. Now, so he suggests an affair, and so how do they, again, you say they even go to the family home. Is he professing love? Is this a sexual affair? What is there any talk of any kind of goals? Is he discontent with his own marriage? These are deeply religious people, so how's this going on? How are they justifying it between them?
Well, Matt was Vanessa's minister and told her that it was okay, that God didn't mind. And and Vanessa and Matt started spending more time together. They were spending their Fridays together. At first, she said that he was helping her through her divorce, but it became sexual. And he told her early on that if he fell in love with her, if they fell in love, that he would get rid of Kari. And
what did he mean by that? Get rid of?
Before long, he started talking about ways to get rid of Kari with Vanessa, and they included things like staging a drive-by shooting or putting something into her milkshake and giving it to her to drink.
Now let's go back a little bit. How is Vanessa listening to this information? She doesn't have this kind of background. Well, nobody really has this kind of background. So how is she listening to this? Is it tongue in cheek? Is she thinking he's bravado? Is she thinking he's exaggerating? Is there some alcohol involved here? What does she think, and why does she think this is sounding reasonable to her?
Well, she's not going to authorities. She's not telling Kari that this is going on. She's taking no action to stop Matt. She became a sounding board for him as he planned his wife's murder. At one point, he started talking about staging a suicide. And at that point, he claims that Kari had once attempted suicide, so everyone would believe that she had done it, that she was despondent about Cassidy. The anniversary of Cassidy's death is coming up, so the timing is good. Vanessa said later that she told him that nobody would ever believe it, but he said, "Oh no, they would believe it." She said that he told her that he was going to type the suicide note, and she said, "Well, nobody will believe that she typed the suicide note." And Matt said, "Well, everybody will believe it. Kari types everything."
So, is there any reason why she doesn't just leave this guy? How does she rationalize this in her mind at that time? Like a lot of people make up a lie that say, well, listen, I was scared, I was afraid for my own life. But how does she rationalize why at that moment she didn't go to authorities or leave him or talk him out of it, or is there any justification for that?
I don't see a justification for that. She did nothing to stop him. She made no effort to do anything to protect Kari at all. She listened while Matt planned a murder. She was telling friends at the time that she thought maybe Matt would be a good father for her daughter. Now,
right.
How she could not have thought that if he was willing to murder one wife, he might not be willing to murder two, I don't know. But the bottom line here is she did nothing to stop him.
Was she involved in the plan? You say she was like a sounding board, but did she say that there was some point where she thought, okay, he's going to go through with this? Because you mentioned the anniversary. So the anniversary is April, or is it March for her daughter dying, Cassidy dying?
I believe it's March 23rd. I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe
yeah. So it's near the end of March or April. Yeah. Okay. So he's discussing this a little bit previous to this anniversary and telling her that it's a good idea. So how much? So he lays out. Give us what he lays out to her in terms of the entire idea of how he's going to pull off this suicide or this murder and portray it as a suicide.
Well, as I said, he talks about different options, like the drive-by shooting. He starts talking about putting something in Kari's milkshake. There are emails that go back and forth between Kari and Matt at the time. One of those emails references Matt saying that he's going to make her another milkshake, this time with not so much chocolate in it. It sounds as if he gave her a milkshake she didn't like, perhaps one that there was something in. So the plan is kind of formulating, it's kind of percolating, and by then Matt is getting on the computer and he's looking for drugs that he can buy over the internet. The computer evidence would later show that he was going back and forth between pornography websites, looking at porn, on his church computer from the Baptist church, and looking for Ambien, presumably to give his wife.
Right. Now, leading up to this, in this last, few days, almost a week before this murder, tell us some of just if there's any particular spectacular or interesting events just previous to this, and then maybe we could lead up to the actual event.
Well, there was a rift developing between Kari and Matt. Matt didn't want to have relations with Kari. For the first time in their marriage, he wasn't interested in her sexually. He was pushing her away, and she felt that. So there are signals that show that this rift developed within the marriage. There was a lot of arguing. Matt claimed that he blamed Kari for Cassidy's death. There was a lot of strong emotion during that week before. And Kari she found some ground-up pills in Matt's briefcase. And on some level, she must have known, or she suspected that he may have planned to use them on her, because she then went to her therapist and said, I think my husband's trying to kill me, but then said, oh no, that can't be true. Matt would never do that. She also wrote in her Bible and asked God to protect her, and said, I don't know what Matt has planned. But she was afraid.
Now, what, if any, concerns from her mother or her relatives, her sister or siblings, was there any concern around this time? Was there any contact with them? Did she reveal anything to them beforehand, even if to say that her marriage was troubled? Tell us about that. What did they know or think just previous to this fateful event?
Well, they knew, Linda, Kari's mom, knew that Kari and Matt were having problems. And after the email in which Matt blamed Kari for Cassidy's death, Kari went to her mother and said, I think maybe we're going to have to get a divorce because I can't live with somebody who thinks that that it's my fault that our daughter's dead. And Linda, at that time, not knowing what was really going on in the marriage, not knowing how frightened Kari was, said, no, not divorce, go for counseling, try counseling. She's looking at her daughter, she's looking at what she thinks is a good marriage, and there are 2 little girls involved, 2 daughters. She's trying to help them keep the marriage together at that point.
What was in what way was Kari supposed to be the murderer of her daughter, or responsible for their daughter being for dying? What was
well,
that?
It wasn't murdering her daughter. It was that she had watched Cassidy suffer so long after all of the operations and everything that at one point she had prayed and said, Lord, just, don't let her hurt anymore. Make it over for her. And Matt, on the other hand, said that he had prayed that Cassidy would grow up and be cured and be healthy and, live a full life. So he said it was Kari's fault that God had answered Kari's prayer and not his.
Yeah, that's a manipulation too. Yeah.
Well, he was using religion, and he was using God in order to make Kari feel guilty.
Yeah, and then and justify what he was already doing himself, so drive her away. Yeah. Okay, so nobody really knew. Really, there was people that. Was there anyone that knew that he was having this affair outside? Did anybody know this?
No, some of the neighbors had noticed Vanessa's car driving up and going into the garage on Friday afternoons. But they didn't really know what was going on. Nobody put it together. So no one really knew about the affair. Although I think Kari suspected it in one of her emails. When he didn't answer her email right away, she said something on the order of, I thought you might be busy with your girlfriend. So I think she was sensing a lot, but was trying to convince herself it wasn't real.
Right. Now, this is April 7th, 2006, just the afternoon before Kari died. Take us back to that afternoon and then the incident itself, and describe it for us, please.
Well, she'd had a really good day. She had an interview for a job at the middle school. She'd always wanted to teach middle school, and she had just aced the interview. I mean, she had done beautifully. And she heard that she was one of the contenders for the slot that was opening up. She was very excited. So she went home about 3 o'clock that afternoon in a really good mood. Within 2 hours, she showed up at the Y for Kenzie's swim practice, looking very angry, very upset, actually looking like she could be ill. There was a lot of tension between her and Matt. Matt was there along with both of the girls. And it appeared that something had happened during that period of time. And Kari just didn't look well. She looked very upset. So they were at the swim practice, and they left. And they got home about 7 o'clock that night. And the next thing that happened was a little bit after midnight when Matt called 911.
And what did he say to 911 operators?
He said that he had just gotten home, that he was out renting a movie and putting some gas in the car, and he found his wife, and it looked like she'd committed suicide, and that there was a note, and it said something like she was sorry. And the 911 operator gave him instructions on what to do in order to give her CPR. And he claimed to be doing that, pulling her off the bed, putting her on the floor, and then starting to pound on her chest while they were waiting for the EMTs and the police to show up. And on the phone call, Matt can be heard talking the whole time, talking about how, yes, he's working on these compressions. He's, trying to revive his wife. He's saying things like she's throwing up and everything, or there's liquid coming out of her mouth and coming out of her nose. And then the next thing he says is, "Oh, the police are here." Well, they had just driven up out front, and what they didn't find was Matt working on Kari. What they found was Matt standing on the front porch talking on the phone.
And who was he talking to? The
He
police?
was talking to the 911 operator.
And what was the idea that if he was talking on the telephone, it would be pretty hard to do that CPR, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, he had a cordless phone. He didn't have it on speaker.
Right.
And it would have been pretty hard to have hauled Kari off of the bed while he's got the phone perched next to his ear without dropping the telephone. And he claimed that she was nude at the time, and he had dressed her. The call was only, I think it's 4 minutes long, and it's very difficult to dress a dead body. And he claimed that Kari was in the bed nude, that he not only pulled her off the bed, but he dressed her and gave her CPR, all before the police showed up.
And then the idea, though, his claim that she was vomiting French fries, and then he said, when questioned, she had maybe 3 French fries, and then the medical examiner said, well, there wouldn't have been any French fries. So there was a lot of, not even before you interviewed him, there was a lot of questions about his behavior, his story, and especially that 911 call and what he did or didn't do.
Yeah, it would turn out that a lot of really everything Matt said wasn't plausible. The condition of Kari's body didn't match his story. He claimed to have only been gone for 45 minutes, but the EMTs found a body that was cooling. Bodies only lose about 1 degree per hour after death. Well, Kari's body was cooling already. It should have still been warm. They found lividity in her lower extremities, that purplish hue from the blood settling after the heart stops. That normally takes quite a while in a healthy person. There were just a lot of things that didn't make sense, but the police ignored them or didn't see them and didn't communicate that to the justice of the peace. The suicide note was typed and unsigned.
And what did the suicide note say specifically?
It basically said that she was very sorry, but that she wanted to be with Cassidy, and that she was leaving, that she knew Matt would take good care of their daughters, and asked him to continue to be the good guy, the good father he had always been. It was very self-serving. It talked a lot about what a great guy Matt was.
Yeah. And also they said another unusual thing was that in this final note it found it odd that she wouldn't mention or say anything about her only sibling, which was Adam. So
her brother.
Seemed odd as well, too.
Very strange.
Now, you say police just wrapped up this story. That again, another point I wanted to make, too, is that he had said that he tried to allude that she was depressed and that she was on medication and on Xanax, and so tried to bolster his story. But the medical examiner found no antidepressants in her system, and it was found that she actually didn't have a prescription for Xanax or any other antidepressant. Isn't that correct?
No, she didn't. She'd been given one that day, but when she'd gone to the doctor that week, She was suffering from anxiety attacks, I think, because she did understand that Matt was trying to hurt her and that, she was in trouble. But she never actually had the prescription filled, and she didn't have any drugs. There weren't any antidepressants or anything in her body. There was no Xanax. What was in her body was Ambien.
Right. Now, after this apparent suicide, how does Kari's family react, and what is their idea about this suicide? Are they giving it any consideration at all? And then what happens as a result of the police wrap-up and their viewpoint on Matt and this suicide?
Well, the police made there was a big error made that night. An autopsy was not ordered. That was a big problem. The body was immediately sent to the mortuary. The police and the justice of the peace, who could have ordered an autopsy, neither one of them looked at all of the, recognized all the alarms going off, and they sent the body to the funeral home instead of to a medical examiner. So when Linda and Jim found out that Kari had supposedly committed suicide, they were devastated, but they heard that it was a clear-cut case, and they believed that it was probably true. They didn't understand how that could be true because Kari wasn't depressed. Kari was doing very well in life. Kari was in a good place. So they didn't understand how it could be true, but they accepted it. And part of the reason was, of course, that Matt had their granddaughter